Welcome to the JD Bunkis podcast. Leafs have hit the Olympic break. We are a day away from the NBA trade deadline and already seeing a ton of action. I've got Michael Grange coming up in a couple of minutes. He wrote this great piece on what's going to happen at the deadline and what the holdup is, which at this point everybody should kind of know what the holdup is for them. But we'll dig into that. But first, just a quick thought on the Leafs here. I'll talk to Gazdic later today about them. I've got some stuff. I do want to look back a little bit and talk a little Hyman. I think that he's the epicenter of things. Thinking about him yesterday and the moment where he becomes a Oiler more than he was a Maple Leaf. You could probably state that case based on the Stanley Cup runs, but yeah, he's officially played more games with the Oilers than the Leafs, which was a bit of a jarring statistic to me about how fast time flies. And yes, Hyman was hurt a bunch when he was a Maple Leaf, so that factors into things. But he also gets passed over for Team Canada for Sam Bennett, who replaces Anthony Cirelli, a move that I think you never want to see a guy get hurt. But there is something about Sam Bennett being back on Team Canada that probably puts a lot more people at ease, just given how successful he has been in big games over the last 2 seasons. But yeah, the Leafs hit the break, and they do it on a 3-game winning streak. They're now 5 points back of the Boston Bruins for the final spot in the Atlantic. And yes, I believe the Bruins have a game in hand, so maybe that's 7 heading into the break, depending on what Boston does tonight, I believe, which is the last slate of games before the break. But all of a sudden, how could you not look at it and go, well, 5 points, Bruins lose tonight, you come back, you got a couple of games before the deadline. What if you're 3 points back? God, what if you're 1 point back? What if you're just right there knocking on the doorstep? Can't that alter plans? I've seen a lot of clips where Elliot Friedman has talked about how this team is not changing their course at this point, that these games did not technically matter when it comes to what this team was going to do at the deadline. It feels pretty clear that Bobby McMahon is going to be headed somewhere else. It would be pretty surprising at this point, right? He's a pending unrestricted free agent. He makes absolutely no money. He's on the doorstep of 20 goals. And he's one of the fastest players in the NHL. And I would argue has added a little bit of edge to his game and taken a step this year. He has. He's less of a black box than he was even a year ago, when I think he had another really good regular season, but didn't quite perform well enough in the playoffs to the point where you would go, okay, yeah, you feel pretty concrete about who this guy is. So he's going to be dealt. I think that's pretty clear. It would be pretty shocking. The question is, how deep are they going to cut? Because for me, I don't care about the Leafs not owning their own pick this year, not in the sense of I'm hoping that they tank and fall into the bottom 5. Yeah, would that be great? Would that do a lot for the franchise if they were able to add a guy like Verhoff to their system? Of course. They don't really have any prospects. Part of what makes this difficult to see and envision in terms of a deadline where they cut really deep and they remove a bunch of players is that there's nobody really waiting in the wings to come up and play NHL minutes for them. Like, you look down at that Marlies roster, and it's not a ton of guys that you would envision just stepping in and playing games for the Maple Leafs. And yeah, they probably take some contracts back at the deadline, assuming that they would be moving out real players, guys that actually matter minutes-wise. I can't help but shake the feeling, and that's what I had going into these games, that what they'll do now is a very minor sell. And I've said this all along throughout the course of the season, that it reminded me a lot of the COVID year, 2020, where the team clearly wasn't it. They weren't bad enough to be out of the mix, but they weren't good enough to look like a contender. And they went into this deadline, and they kind of soft-sold Tyson Barrie. It was, hey, if they get a first-round pick, they'd move off of them. They didn't get that. The reports were that some teams were willing to give up a second. Toronto didn't want to do that. They ended up adding Nick Patan, famously dubbed by Mark Savard Leaf for a day when he'd be out on the ice. And it was a mostly stand-pat deadline. And to me, that's like the one thing I just don't want to see moving forward. Obviously, they're not in a position where they can be buyers. That's asinine. They don't have really anything to give up, and the team's not in a playoff spot. So any idea that they would actually be going out and pilfering even depth pieces, even depth assets, to me would be nuts. Completely indefensible given where they're at currently. I just can't help. So one of the things I don't like about teams, and this bit the Raptors in the ass too, and I think that this bites a lot of teams in the ass, they get cute and they try to do this 2 timelines thing. You saw it with the Golden State Warriors. I think it's a big reason why they are where they're at right now. Instead of just being all in on Steph Curry, they tried to draft a couple of guys, and they missed on those picks. But for a while, do you not remember all the Jonathan Kuminga rumors? Oh, they can't move Jonathan Kuminga because he's the future of the organization, blah, blah, blah. The Raptors did the same thing. They tried to do 2 timelines. Hey, we had 1 playoff run, and Scotty Barnes looks ahead of schedule, and maybe we can make this thing work, and it doesn't. It rarely does. It's the greediest line of thinking that you can have as an organization, especially in the world of the era of parity. You don't want to make stupid moves and go all in on a team that's an aged group and give up all of your future. I'm not saying that, but I don't like when you try to ride the middle. And it kind of feels like that is exactly what the Leafs are preparing you for heading into this deadline, where they sell a couple of guys that might not have contracts the following year, but that the blade doesn't cut deep enough where they actually use a unique opportunity to replenish the cupboards a bit by getting real prices back, real pieces back for players that I don't think will command the same price in an offseason when teams have more options at their disposal and they don't know what the future holds for them. The beauty of the NHL trade deadline is that teams act in desperation, and they often make moves they regret. You've got them over a barrel. They've got to satisfy their fan base. They've got to satisfy their team. They've got to be able to say that they did everything possible. And it's the best time of year to acquire a draft pick from someone that a team goes, well, we can't really be thinking about 2028 right now. And then 2028 comes along. They're like, what'd you get for that guy? Or what'd you get for that pick? Oof. That actually brings me to the Raptors, who, by all accounts, and according to our Michael Grange, who I'll bring on in just 1 second here, he wrote this great piece. It's up on sportsnet.ca. Everybody should read it because listen, he's going to inform everybody in terms of just exactly what is going on here. There's been so much I think, trash rumors about the Raptors over the last 2 months. And this Grange piece is great, and it's why Raptors trade deadline approach is complicated by Jakob Poeltl's status. And it brings me back to when they traded for Jakob Poeltl. And I hated the deal at the time. I couldn't stand it. Why wouldn't you just go out and try to sign him in the offseason? Why wasn't that, if you were going to offer him, I think it was $20 million at the time, was there really going to be that kind of a market? Okay, you're competing maybe with a couple of different teams, but you gave up a first-round pick, and it was a weak draft class. It was not the strongest. Everyone was talking about how there were no players there. But all of a sudden, you ended up on draft night, and the Raptors weren't a good team, and they were picking 8th overall. And there are a couple of guys that were in that range that could have really helped the Toronto Raptors right now and certainly would have a ton of trade value. And then the Raptors compounded that mistake with Jakob Poeltl this past offseason when they decided to inexplicably give him this contract extension that made him very well paid, despite being a 30-year-old center. And I don't really understand the urgency for this move, especially given the contract that they gave to him, but just how punitive he has been for, a good player. When he's on the floor, he obviously really helps them. We're seeing centers return in terms of their level of import around the NBA from the era of Project 6ix9ine, which actually is all of a sudden starting to work for the Toronto Raptors. But deadlines matter. You can get teams to do stupid things because they start to get a little desperate, just like the Raptors did with Jakob Poeltl. Michael Grange of Sportsnet, he does join me now. What's up, buddy? How we doing?
I'm good, JD. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, it's great to have you today. So
I do have a question for you, though.
Yeah, hit me.
Am I allowed to ask about the Airbnb ad?
Yeah, I can't.
Ad read you do?
Yeah, what do you want? I've never heard it. I don't listen to the ad breaks, but yeah, sure, go ahead.
The one you finish about this time at the cottage, it's so great, and then at the end you sort of say, and you don't have to invite someone just because they have a cottage.
Yeah,
and I'm like who is that guy? Like, that's harsh. Like, don't ever invite me to your cottage or our cottage.
Let's just put it this way. I think that is a very relatable thing that everyone has had to deal with, where You've got
bring us all up to the cottage, but we don't really like
yeah,
it.
exactly. Like, come on,
Okay.
you're going to pretend like that's never been a scenario that you've ever encountered where someone's like, hey, I'm having a cottage weekend, and they invite a bunch of people that you do like, but the person that owns the cottage, you're like, ugh. Or you're trying to make a plan, and it kind of centers around, I hope this person does invite us to their amazing cottage. And you know what's weird? Oftentimes that person has like an incredible family, and then this one guy stinks and treats it as though it was like his cottage.
I mean, we won't dwell, but
I
in
have
your
multiple
circle,
people in mind.
in your circle,
Yeah.
like, I mean, there can only be 2 or 3 people this is applying to. It has to be creating friction for you. That's all.
I'll tell you this right now. I am old now, and so I don't do that anymore in terms of the peripheral friend that I can't stand. That's part of life, right? You get a little bit older, and your threshold for the friends who don't bring you joy in your life, it's too much. Your time is too valuable. Like, we're on death's door here, it gets over. The run is done. I'm 100, you're out here having hip surgery. Like, it's done. We're fast the time. Time is precious. We can't just be giving it to people, even if it is for a great cottage. And yeah, you know what? There's a freebie for Airbnb on the show, which is, that's why now I do use that product for exactly that circumstance so that I can invite people I love. Okay, Raptors trade. But before we get into Raptor stuff, I want to run down a couple of things that happened yesterday and your thoughts on them. Because, okay, let's start with Harden. I'll just say it. I hate James Harden deeply. And the idea of a team that can't get anything done in the postseason and that just like fell apart in the postseason, saying to themselves, the answer is getting James Harden, has got to be one of the greatest logically. Like, I don't know, maybe it does make sense. Maybe it's like the two negatives make a positive and that this is actually what helps them break through. I kind of get being down on Darius Garland this year. The fit hasn't been great. He hasn't been healthy. He's got the toe stuff. But if you would have asked me before the season started, hey, Darius Garland for James Harden, I would have said there's absolutely 0% chance that a trade would ever happen like this. I don't know. What do you make of it? Because I'm kind of astounded that they sold this low on Garland and that they decided to bring James Harden into a mix for a team that does feel a little volatile.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, I said something about this on Blue Sky last night where, you look at Harden and I just don't know how to rate him, right? Because, his teams are always really good, but they never win. And he misses a million shots, but somehow his offense is still efficient. And, he quits his team, but he volunteers to go to Cleveland in February. Like, okay, whatever. It's I don't know. But
2 weeks, by the way, after he was opining about how he's found his home in LA and that this is the last place he wants to be and that he's finally comfortable. But yeah, anyway.
It's awesome. I guess what it says to me is Cleveland is really desperate, right? Like, they need to make something happen. Donovan Mitchell's going to be looking for extension this summer if he has reason not to sign there. And people didn't think he was going to sign there the first time, their whole infrastructure falls apart. I think for this season, maybe even setting aside the playoffs a little bit. First of all, Garland hasn't played, and when he's has played, he hasn't been good. So if you're really trying to lock in this season, James Harden, for all his flaws, is probably your best opportunity to kind of get you to the finish line and give you a little insurance if Mitchell needs a little rest, takes a little load off him, and maybe, and this is a big maybe, and it's in a playoff scenario where Harden isn't the only solution to in all moments, then it takes a little pressure off him and he can execute at a little higher level. But I think this year for sure, Harden's been a better player than Darius Garland.
And more reliable.
And all those kinds of things. So I think it just says that Cleveland's got to get something done this year, and they weren't going to get it done with Garland.
So that's the only part of it where I go, all right, I guess I don't mind it to the degree of this is as flat as you would imagine the East is going to be at the top, right? Like, you project a year forward, the Celtics get healthier with Tatum. The assumption is that he's going to return at some point this year. But even still, that doesn't feel like the Celtics teams of the years past. And I would imagine that he'll be on a heavy minutes restriction. They'll be uber careful with him. I don't know how many minutes he's going to end up playing in a postseason series. The Knicks look flawed. They don't look like a championship contender. The Pistons are still too far away from me, and I do think that there is a absolute chance they get into the postseason, and with defenses just gearing up for Cade Cunningham and saying, yeah, this is our primary focus, that they're not going to be as good as the team that works their ass off in the regular season and has had a good spell of health and a tougher team. They do. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to disrespect the Pistons, but they feel more like a great regular season story than they do, oh my God, I can't believe this team is in the final story. So the Cavs, I believe from a talent standpoint, are pretty uniquely positioned. And if you can go out and get James Harden, and he actually gives you James Harden level play, you're right. It makes more sense for this year. I think projecting moving forward is where it starts to get a little bit more difficult. And the potential is that if Garland does get healthy a year from now, his trade value is going to far exceed where a 36-year-old James Harden is. The second part of this, though, is I'm kind of wondering if this is a scenario where you're looking at it and saying, maybe this is in for a penny, in for a pound. I talked about this with Bobby Marks yesterday. There's only a few teams that would really want to roll the dice, in my opinion, on acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo with the uncertainty of what his future is. And even if you look at like the Golden State Warriors, for example, who are reported to be in the mix for this guy, are the Warriors really in a position right now in the standings in a deep Western Conference where they can say, yeah, don't worry, we're going to punt on this year. We'll have Giannis next year with Steph Curry? I don't know. I'm not really sure. But if you're the Cavs, and you're in the Eastern Conference and you've got Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, that's enough to carry you to the postseason. And then if you moved off of Evan Mobley, and again, it would take more than that contractually, but you brought in Giannis Antetokounmpo, and you told me, hey, I've got Harden now as the third banana with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Donovan Mitchell. That's actually something where I do look at the Eastern Conference and go, yeah, that would be, to me, pretty much unquestionably the heavy favorite, assuming Giannis can at some point, at any point, regain his full form come playoff time.
Yeah, and you talk about in for a penny, in for a pound. A scenario like that, you're basically in it for 2 years, and it's this year and next year. And if it doesn't work, you kind of strip it all down and start again, right?
Because and you're getting LeBron next year on a vet minimum.
That's right, and all your contracts are coming off the books, and it's not the craziest thing, and so. I like Cleveland. I liked them last year. They were a 64-win team. I think they got unlucky with some injuries in the playoffs. They were my, I wouldn't say runaway, but strong favorite to be the best team coming out of the East this year. I still, if I had a gun to my head, even before this move, I still would have picked Cleveland to be the team that comes out of the East, especially if they get Max Strus back eventually. Who knows when? I think the Boston scenario is interesting. I think there's the potential for some serious chemistry issues, no fault of anybody, but trying to inject a part-time, out of fit, sort of not game-shaped Jason Tatum into that scenario. And, Cleveland, for all their flaws, I think still has the most top-end talent and has the most collective cohesiveness. Even after this trade, they're only really adding one player in space of a guy who has been a part-time player this year. So, moving Mobley for Giannis that's bold because, it's just like I talked last week about, would the Raptors ever get in on this? And the expectation is I talked to like 5 different GMs or 5 different front office people. And they were all like, yeah, the ask there is Scotty. And then you start doing the math on that and you're like, you're trading away 7 years. That's really what you're trading. Which if you want to have something sustainable, I don't think it's a great idea. If you're in Cleveland's situation, you're not going to have anything sustainable. It's not going to be sustainable anyway. James Harden's 37.
Yep.
So, let's make the best of this year, maybe next, and we'll figure it out after that.
Well, yeah. And, if you're trading Evan Mobley or trading Scotty Barnes, the Raptors don't have Donovan Mitchell. So the idea that they would do this actually does make a little bit more sense for their standpoint. And just trying to piece this together, not knowing anybody or not speaking to front offices the way that you do, I just can't help but feel like if Giannis does get moved ahead of the deadline, that's the destination. That's the move that ends up happening. That's the team that justifies it. That's the team with a blue chip asset in Evan Mobley, some contracts to be able to make it work, and finds a way to acquire this player and satisfy what Milwaukee could at least justify as a great return, where they're not just saying, hey, we sold low at the head of a deadline, or we got spooked by the idea that this thing could get ugly, or he demands to only go to 3 different destinations. Plus, my guess would be that Giannis is just more amenable, like, for going somewhere else right now than he will be in the offseason, which is when he's going to be able to say, well, no, I do want to go to Miami, or I do want to go to New York. I do want to call my shot because it's a full season rather than going immediately and playing with stars for a playoff run. Anyway, the other one, because I don't think I need to go over the Vucevic for Simmons. It's like, yeah, they duck the tax and they get a guy who can't play defense, and people think that, that Jason Tatum's coming back. The Jaren Jackson Jr. one is curious from a Raptors standpoint because you could make the case. I don't really like the fit because he's not a good rebounder, and I think they need more rebounding than rim protection. But when you looked at the price, I got to admit, it was a little light for a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. Originally, people see that, and they're like 3 first-round picks, and I had the same reaction where I went, oh, my God. And then you start to see some of the protections on them and whose picks they actually are, and you're like, I don't know, I feel like the Raps could have actually done that deal. So what do you think? Do you think that they actually took calls on that, that was something that they discussed internally? Because that price point was not insane for a guy that could have stepped in and been their center.
He certainly profiles as somebody, the Raptors should have been looking at when you're looking at this core of, RJ to, Scotty to, let's leave Jakob out of this, to Brandon Ingram. So it's 24 to 28 years old. You don't want to. That's why the whole Anthony Davis thing never made a ton of sense to me, because he's going to be 33. So Jaren Jackson Jr., I think positionally would have been a fit. And you're right, the price isn't all that significant. I think the challenge there is trying to find somebody, that the Grizzlies would be interested in taking on, either in terms of, and when you look at the Raptors' selection of contracts, they either have a lot of term and they're a little bit, I don't want to say they're underwater. You might say that about Pirtle right now, but they got a little hair on them in the sense of, from like say, Quickly's deal. So, it comes back to RJ Barrett, and that's fine. I think if Jaren Jackson is the guy you're trying to get, that's a reasonable price to pay, but it all depends does Memphis want to do that deal? And, I don't have any specific insight into that transaction, but you're right. I mean, it looks like a trade a lot of people could have got in on. Saying that, I think Jaren Jackson Jr., we'll see if he pops a little bit here in Utah, but he hasn't exactly fulfilled all of his potential. He's, and he's got he's on, I think, 4 years, $200+ million coming up. So, you're pretty committed when you're making that move, but I'll be interested to find out if the Raptors, kick that around, or if they had a way to get to that deal at all.
Yeah. Again, I think that there is a case to be made for him for the Raptors, given the price and the fact that, he's a big who can shoot. He's a big who can provide offense. He does protect the rim extremely well. And so the idea of pairing him with Scotty Barnes would make you pretty, and Colin Murray-Boyle's assuming that he gets to stay here in that trade, which I don't see that why he wouldn't, given the price point of acquisition. You would be thinking damn, they're going to be tough to score on in the paint. But to me, the Raptors deadline centers around 2 things, and one of them isn't rim protection, and it gets confused with the center need, which is yes, they need a big, but they need him for rebounding. There's too many nights, and we just saw this the other day against that Utah team, where it's listen, nice step forward for Utah this year, not just a complete tank year. They are well coached. Lauri Markkanen's a very good player, blah, blah, blah. Raptors just got caved in on the glass. And this team that's drastically inferior, and we could talk about some of the other stuff they did in that game, whether it was the bad transition offense for a good transition team, whatever. My God, it's frustrating watching them play great defense, get stops, and then immediately the other team is resetting with 14 seconds left on the clock and going and here's our second turn at this because you guys cannot get a rebound. And the other thing is shooting. So you're looking at it through that context of hey, can you get these 2 things shored up for your team? And I don't know if Jaren Jackson Jr. really does satisfy that in a way where you want to be moving multiple picks and saying, well, we still have 2 holes to fill when it comes to that regard of our team. So that's the reason why I could at least justify why they weren't taking that call. So you wrote this piece, and it's on Pirtle, right? And it's how he's basically at the epicenter of everything that they're trying to do at this deadline. I'll start with this. Privately, you would think that the Raptors are very concerned with where this guy's back is at if they are really trying to dump a guy that they just gave a contract extension to, and that they would be willing to part with assets in order to move off of him for players that are imperfect fits with the Raptors. Like Domantas Sabonis is having a bad year and, again, does not answer all of the needs that this team has, and suddenly you don't look at them as a contender. That's the kind of move you make. Like, if you think that he's going to be fine in the future, only if you believe you can win a championship this year. If they're looking at trying to trade Pirtle, that would indicate to me, with everything that I've read in this piece, and even though I think you tweeted that Pirtle was moving a little crisper at practice yesterday, that he's on the floor. But if I'm trying to dump that deal now, given that I just signed that extension, it's hard not to believe that their doctors are looking at him and saying, yeah, we just actually don't know how this thing's ever going to recover properly.
I think the biggest issue there, look, like writ large, the Pirtle contract has, it raised eyebrows from the minute it was signed.
Yeah.
Both from the timing, the length, the money a little less so. I think the money will look less significant 3 years from now when the cap is up 10, 15, whatever percent. But in today's dollar, it's significant. I think he's on 3 years, 27 million, something like that. So it's never been a deal. It was never a deal. It got signed and people are like, wow, like that's a great bit of business. And, national voices, guys like, let's just say Zach Lowe as an example. There's others who I've bumped into. That's one of the first things that comes up. And, these aren't guys who are out there hammering teams for decisions they make. It's just a little odd. It's looked a lot more odd, obviously, since he's missed more than half the season with a back problem that nobody can identify. I mean, I talked to people very close to the situation yesterday, and they're just saying, look, it's confusing. You can imagine he's had MRIs at the yin yang. The results are always the same. Nothing structural, no kind of nerve pressure. It's just a wonky back, and civilians, we can all kind of relate to that. But he's got the best medical care a human could probably get, and they can't fix it. So it's concerning. Someone told me the other day that when they signed that deal, it was with knowledge that they kind of had two paths with it. One is if the Raptors return to competitive relevance, and he was part of that, well, they've got a quality starting center under contract for the next 2 or 3 years, which is kind of as much of a horizon as you can hope for in the NBA. If a better opportunity comes up, or if somehow there's not a fit, or this whole Brandon Ingram experiment hadn't worked, there was enough fans of Pirtle's in the league that they felt it was a deal that they could have moved. That deal is unmovable right now. And even attaching, a bevy of assets to it to get off of it, which I don't think the Raptors are in position to do right now, it's probably still unmovable. Like, you just put yourself in the shoes of the management at Sacramento, for example, where you're trading, I wouldn't say a franchise icon, but a pretty well-regarded player in Domantas Sabonis. And, your reward for that trade is taking on a player who's has had a bad back for 4 years. 4 months. No one can figure out why. And he's got 4 years left on his deal. Like, it's just a tough sell. And I think that's been sort of the roadblock in any of these trade scenarios that keep coming up. It's, the length of the contract and the fact that the player's not available right now.
I got to tell you, like, it's hard. I don't want to get too bogged down on this, like the what ifs, because this is supposed to be more of a future-looking segment in terms of what they're going to do tomorrow. But when that contract was signed, so I had multiple texts from people going, what is this? Like, why are they doing this now? And to me, I look at it, how indefensible it is you can play the results and say, well, he ended up with the back, and that's a tough break for them. Everyone acknowledges that Pirtle is a good player when healthy and a very additive piece. And there's been many, many times that we've looked at him and been like, man, they're a different team with him on the floor, and he's fit with a bunch of different guys, all that different stuff. But the idea that he had to get this contract done in a scenario where if things didn't work out, it would somehow facilitate a trade, that's the part where I go, well, that's nonsense. You got the 8th overall, or you gave up the 8th overall pick in a draft to get an expiring Pirtle. And if we're looking at the prices of what expirings are and what Pirtle would be if he was healthy and they did decide to sell him and he was at full strength, you would assume that all those teams still would have been there and that they would have been the ones that would have decided to sign him. And when you're talking about, like, why you sign a player ahead of time is because you're hedging a bet of what you would have to pay him if he has a great season. And when I look at Pirtle, because we can just $27 million, whatever, it's 16% of your cap. Is there a scenario where a team would have looked at Jakob Pirtle based on even the best possible outcome season that they would have had and said, we're giving him 18, 19, 20% of our cap? Like, I don't think there was. And so it's honestly one of the more indefensible moves of the last entire NBA season, where you're talking about extending this guy to a deal that is now so tough on you that you can't even move him to the Sacramento Kings. Like, God, that's a tough pill to swallow, especially for a team with this scenario here, which we're like kind of entering, which is you have figured out that the Ingram Barnes thing works and that those two guys feel pretty concrete as very good players in a soft Eastern Conference. The team has a ton of holes, though, and one of them is that they can't rebound the ball. And I don't feel desperate about the Raptors. Like, I don't think that there's anything that they could realistically do that would all of a sudden elevate them in a way like we talked about with the Cleveland trade. But you still want to be able to position yourself, like get work done ahead of time and not have to leave everything for an offseason. And right now, because of this blockage, it really does feel like work that they should be doing now or that they could be doing now is not going to be able to be done, and that you're basically going to be paralyzed with this contract going into the offseason, because I just can't imagine there's a scenario where this thing all of a sudden improves a few months from now.
Well, the scenario will be is if he gets back in place.
Sure.
And, I think that's the best hope.
Yeah.
And you kind of revert to plan A, which was he's your starting center for this year. And let's say the next two.
Mm-hmm.
And if that works out, the deal gets a lot less painful as you move along. All of a sudden it gets a little movable. The last year there's guarantees based on how many minutes and games he plays and team success. Based on this year, none of those guarantees would have kicked in. So, that's it. There's no other argument. There's no other discussion around it.
Yeah.
Jakob Pirtle has to play, and it will solve a number of problems for the Raptors if he does play. But to your point, this isn't a perfect team, and it's kind of been a good ride so far. We'll see what happens the next 30 games. I think the real challenge with this team as constructed is how do you get from interesting, which is I think really what they are,
yep,
to a really good team. And, I kind of struggle to see how that happens. Not just because of Jakob Pirtle, but there's just kind of like a core that's, you're hoping for some internal improvement because I think it's going to be a little bit hard to unravel it. And in an ideal world, you would have had some of your youngsters really pop.
Mm-hmm.
And, Colin Murray-Boyles certainly would probably qualify in that regard. But after that, they haven't really. And that's been another story. Like, I know you want to look forward, not back, but it is pretty interesting when you look at the cascade of decisions made in the last 4 or 5 years. There's been more. There haven't been as many wins as there have been ones that make you go, huh? And just the other night, like I'm not a huge Isaiah Collier fan. I'm not going to sit here and pretend he's God's gift to anything.
Yeah.
But I think he had 13 or 14 assists against the Raptors. Looked fantastic. They couldn't keep him out of the paint. I think he had 22 assists or something the other night last night for Utah. And he's the guy. Utah picked him with the first round pick the Raptors sent for the Ochai Agbaji deal.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not make or break. I'm not sitting here, oh my God, but you need little wins along the way to kind of keep things rolling. And I think it'd be terrible to say right now that the Raptors have kind of broke even. You look at the pick they didn't get in the Pirtle, what they gave up in the Pirtle deal. Well, that pick turned into
Dillingham,
the 8th overall pick.
Yeah.
It turned into Dillingham. But what's significant about that is the Spurs traded that pick to Minnesota.
Yep.
They got an unprotected and a top 2 protected future first.
Correct.
Like from Minnesota, and we can sit here and discuss what are the odds of Anthony Edwards being in Minnesota in 2030 and 2031. I would venture they're probably pretty low.
Yep.
Like I don't know anything, but that's just the superstar pattern, right?
It's a high value pick.
Yeah. You do 7, 8 years in your kind of smaller market where you're drafted, and then you go, you know what? Like, I want to try LA. I want to try New York. I want to try Miami. Um, and all of a sudden things change. So those kind of decisions at the time, they're mostly pretty defensible. But the fact that they don't work out or haven't worked out ideally does affect where your team is at any given moment.
Absolutely, they do, and it's really what is frustrating about looking back on some of this stuff is it did feel like they tried to expedite things rather than look further forward when it came to their future and saying, "Yep, we don't like these picks aren't playing for us now, or these assets aren't giving us meaningful contributions right now." But we're also not at that place, and it did. It felt a little rushed when it comes to moving for Pirtle and giving up a pick that did end up having a lot of value. There's even other guys like, yeah, people will be like, well, it's Dillingham. What's he done? It's like, yeah, you could add Bazelis a couple of picks later, who is also someone that was in that target range. Like, so yeah, the other piece for me is like, really when we're talking about this, like, yes, they haven't had enough little wins. They haven't had enough hits where it's been like the Grady Dicks of the world. And yeah, okay, like Jamal Shed is a very good piece and a good find, but I don't think that like he's elevating your championship ceiling, right? Like he's a good player. But if that's one of your biggest franchise wins over the last 5 years, probably not the best thing. To me, it's like you got 3 guys in the orbit of Barnes and Ingram that you needed at least one of them to be concrete in the way that they worked out. You made the OG trade, you brought in 2 players, and then you made a first-round pick trade in order to get Jakob Pertl. And right now, I would say in terms of feeling like that's concrete, they're 0 for 3. And that brings me to the RJ Barrett of it all, where it's like he doesn't make enough money where you can just toss him in a trade and take a flyer on someone who's a extreme buy low. You can't extend him because of what it does to your cap situation moving forward, especially with this Pirtle thing on the books. And yet it doesn't seem to me like when we're doing all these trade rumors and there's this many names out there that he's at the top of the pile in terms of organizations that are overly interested in giving up real assets for him. And so I don't know. It feels like this does play out into the offseason and he's moved and shopped as an expiring. But what have you been able to gather just in terms of the way that the league looks at this guy and how they value him? Because that, to me, has actually been kind of a hard thing to pin down.
I would say of those 3 stories, Pirtle, Quickly, and Barrett, he's probably been the closest to a win.
Yeah.
And that's because I think he was, it's been interesting. You would think that within the NBA, and I'm sure it is true at most levels, but you'd think that every time you talk to somebody, they would be way up on a player or a trend regarding a player, as you are. I mean, I'm an outsider, they're an insider kind of thing, and has been interesting to me the last year and especially this year. I found in a lot of my conversations around RJ Barrett, there was still judgment being attached to him based on how he played in New York, or maybe, certain elements of how he played here in Toronto. And I think this year, very slowly, people have kind of come around on and recognized he is, it's like Brandon Ingram. What did he say at training camp? I just thought he was a chucker, right? Talking about RJ Barrett. And I think one of the great quotes, actually. but I think, through this year, when he's played, I think he's shown he's a very adaptable player. He's been a positive, obviously. But I think all that's done is got him to kind of neutral, right? Like, I think he's a guy that, I think if you were having trade conversations last year, it would have been a lot more difficult. I think this year, with one more year left on his deal, his age, his production, teams would be interested, certain teams. So I think the challenge is what is going to be his extension number. And if you're either meeting that, that's one thing. But if you're not, he's 25-5 and he fits in with your group and he wants to be here in Toronto. He enjoys playing here. I think it's meaningful to him. And that's not always the case with whoever you're going to bring into this situation to replace it, because you're going to have to replace it. It'd be different if Jacoby Walter was 6'7", not 6'5", and he was just absolutely not like breaking the door down to be an NBA starter. Like, I like Jacoby Walter. I think he's got a chance to be a good role player in this league, maybe more. But, he's not the obvious replacement. Neither is Grady Dick the obvious replacement. So you've got to find a replacement, and it's harder said than done.
Yeah.
Easier said than done is what
Yeah.
I mean.
So you did reference again. I don't want to step on all the things in the piece because I do like people trying to funnel towards the work and actually read the work. But you do outline, hey, the most likely outcome of this deadline is that they just duck the tax, right? Like that they just make a move where they get under the tax line. And I think I talked to Bobby Marks yesterday. And he said I wouldn't bet the 401k on it, but close that they end up doing that, right? Like that's the only truly shocking outcome of this deadline for the Raptors is if they went, yeah, we're just paying the tax. We're not getting that. What is it, $14 billion?
Yeah, it would be
Malpractice.
I think it'd be almost indefensible.
Yeah, no, it really
Right?
would.
Not that it's my money. I
Yeah.
don't care.
Yeah.
But it does mean you're taxing. That triggers
No.
some ongoing things.
You can't do
and
it.
it's $15 million. You're out of pocket. And what could you use that money for? I don't know.
Totally.
Something.
No, of course.
Right. So
where I'm going with this though is, do you think the timing of that move would indicate anything? Like again, we're kind of getting close to the 11th hour here. We're almost 24 hours away from the deadline. But if that gets done, say, like with a healthy amount of time before Thursday's deadline, would that indicate to you more, hey, you know what, actually maybe they are working on something, rather than if the longer this thing goes, the more it is like, yeah, they're not actually exploring anything serious. They're just going to dump this money and move forward with the team that they've got.
I have reported and have been told that they were looking to make this trade before sort of the last hour.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, one, I think when you're a non-tax team, it gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of trades you can make with other teams. And two, if the team you're trading with knows that you're already under the tax, or say the team you're trading with knows that you need to get under the tax, well, then that gives them a little bit of leverage on you. Maybe it translates into pick protections or an added second, that kind of thing. So it just kind of cleans up your balance sheet, so to speak, when you go into this, these last 24 hours. So yeah, if it happens in 5 minutes, then maybe there's something going on. I know they've been trying to do something. The challenge is you need another team to trade with. And so when you're looking at, just sending somebody into space, salary cap space, well, that team is going to want to hold on to that space because if a bigger deal comes along, something to do with Giannis, let's say, then they have an opportunity to gain more assets in return for renting out that space, so to speak, or selling out that space. Similarly, when you're talking about throwing Ochai Agbaji into a deal like $6.5 million plus you're in the plus a minimum, so you're at $8.5-9 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are the pieces that can help a bigger trade get done too.
Yeah.
So people aren't in a rush to kind of, okay, we'll just do that. So I would say your assessment's probably right. If it happens sometime today, maybe there's something else cooking, or there's the hopes of something else cooking. But the last I heard on this from people who would know is there's likely only going to be one move, and it's likely going to be the most boring one conceivable. So
yeah,
it's, you send a minimum contract, let's say Jonathan Mobo, to the Brooklyn Nets, who have, they're one of the few cap space teams. Mm-hmm. You send a lightly protected second round pick. You can send up to $8 million to grease, to help grease a trade. So maybe, I don't know how much of that you would use. And it'll be like it never happened. It'll be, all this for nothing, but that's often the case.
So again, we've gone over what's sticking things, what's most likely to happen. The only part of this that's kind of been, I guess, a little lost in the shuffle is the Raptors were at least linked to, hey, what they could be doing is adding a bench big, somebody that is not overly exciting, but gives them depth at the position because, again, like I like Mamu. I think it's been a great signing for this team. It's hard to parse or nitpick a guy that's making as little as he has, who's added as much as he has. But you see it, man, in a lot of these games where they need a little rim. Like he's a sieve defensively. And yeah, there's just some games where he's not the guy to go to. Like he's not the game closing option. And it would be nice if they just had someone else. And like, man, I feel for Murray Boyles where he's a young kid and he's dealing with a thumb injury. And I see him grabbing at that thing all the time. He's reluctant to go up. it would just be okay to me if you could find somebody that could take a few of the minutes from those guys at a small price. Do you get the sense that, yeah, they're in on anything there in terms of the, of course, salary dump move, which is going to happen, but a supplemental trade where they're bringing somebody back, not effectively in the same move, but separately, that they are still working quite hard at adding just a guy who can give them some minutes at the 5, who rebounds the basketball and can play some measure of defense?
I mean, we've all heard the names that are out there that would fit that category. It's Day'Ron Sharp with Brooklyn, Gogo Batadze in Orlando. I know they sniffed around Kevon Looney in New Orleans, but he's got a player option, I think, or a team option next year on his deal, and I don't think that was very attractive to the Raptors.
No.
So, Nick Richards, I'd heard that the Raptors had sort of talked about trying to get him with Agbaji and maybe a couple of second-round picks. I'm not sure how true that is. Again, I don't know how much he helps other than he's big and athletic. Yeah. Look, I don't think Mo Bamba is anybody's idea of a hero sort of thing or going to save the day. But I mean, I think in the right circumstances, maybe you would have played him more than 6 minutes. And the reality is that's why they didn't offer him another 10-day is Dr. Rakovic, had him, put him out on the floor once, decided he wasn't going to help, and he was just burning up salary cap money. So, okay, we're done with this. So, I mean, you can go through all these scenarios, and if, the coach doesn't trust the guy, and, what was the point? Mm-hmm. So, I think of those names we're talking about, I think Sharp would be interesting. I think there's going to be some competition there. Mm. So, how many are you going to give up a first-round pick for that?
No. That's
a little interesting. Batadze, he makes some sense because he's so buried in Orlando, and they've got so many. They're going to be a very, very expensive team next year. He's on $8 million. But then the other thing you got to think about in this context too, as you mentioned, Sandro, is the Raptors going to want to sign him next year, and this luxury tax threshold issue that they're facing now isn't all of a sudden going away next year. All their big contracts remain on the books. So, you go and add, a guy who's making only $8 million. Well, then you also want to probably, Sandro, is he going to be a full mid-level guy? I mean, I don't think so. But the fact that he could be had for that range means there's going to be a lot of competition from teams who have the full mid-level. So, you're probably going to have to spend close to the mid-level, maybe $8-10 million. All of a sudden, you've made a move this year that complicates your optionality regarding keeping Sandro around next year. So, again, it all leads to boring.
I'll tell you with Sandro. I'll tell you with Mamu, though, it's like he reeks of, it's great when he's on this deal and it's fresh and it's new. Yeah. And then the second you sign him this offseason to close to a mid-level exception, I promise you people are going to start to notice the warts in the game a little bit differently. And, I don't know.
We all do it, right? At $3 million, it's hard to not look good.
Yes.
At $13 million, the standards get a little higher. I would say the way he's played this year, it's been pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you'd argue that he's in that $8 to $10 to $12 million range. But, it's going to be interesting to see the kind of competition required because that's what drives it up in terms of years and dollars.
Can I tell you the truth of what I would actually do with him?
Love to hear it.
Trade.
I understand the thinking.
Yeah.
The challenge there, JD, is it's really hard to get value for a guy making $2.5 million.
Yeah, that's it.
There's just not that many other guys out there on similar money.
For sure. I just don't want to be pressed with that decision. Positive. Like if you could move him for the backup big, right? I would actually be saying that's the sort of trade that you want to be doing because just me personally, like the player. Yeah. I think re-signing him to a contract like that is not going to bear fruit for you, and it doesn't fit what I think that the roster ultimately does need. He's a nice piece on this team. I don't think that next year where they want to go, if they can't make the right moves using some of those other pieces, I would just say, that's been my thinking the last 2 weeks with him where I'm like, man, I wonder if they would take the step back to take a step forward move if there was something there rather than be put in that position where they've got to re-sign him to a contract that they don't really love and be basically back in the same spot where they're going, yeah, we got a couple of big men. One doesn't play and the other one we don't really like to play in crunch time. Anyways, Grange, it's been great work. Obviously, everybody's following you right now as we hope to see something happen with the Raptors over the next 24 hours. Thanks for doing this, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, JD, take care of yourself.
Yeah, you too, man. Michael Grange of Sportsnet. Yeah, that probably sounds stupid to some people, but yeah, just. Do you think the Raptors can win this year? No. There's like a 1% chance I could see them getting to an Eastern Conference final. It's a flat East. They do have two really good players that I like a lot. Barnes is playing incredibly well. I guess if they did get Pirtle back, that would probably change a little bit of the math for me. But yeah, they're too flawed. You can't shoot and you can't rebound. And the idea that you're going to win 7 games, given what we've seen, the track record against the better teams in the Eastern Conference, yeah, kind of tough to point to that and say you got a ton of faith in it. The interesting thing with Pirtle to me is, one, I do not want the Raptors to trade him. And I know Grange is saying that he's basically untradeable, so it feels like a bit of a straw man. But it's good to remember how flippant they've been with first-round picks, like Thad Young, first-round pick. I don't care if you say it was a trade back. They gave up a first-round pick. Ochai Agbaji, first-round pick. Jakob Poeltl, 8th overall pick that became, as Grange outlined, a extremely valuable future first from Minnesota. They've just kind of been like, yeah, don't worry. When we've acquired a bunch of these added firsts, we're just sort of flipping them out the door for other guys, roll pieces, this, that, the other. And you see what a crunch it puts you in. And if they did have a bunch of extra first-round picks in the cupboards right now, or some of these guys that they actually hit on, and you decided to move off of a couple of those assets to get rid of Pirtle's contract, that would be more palatable. But at this point, it's just, I don't want them to trade Pirtle because I just don't think that they can spare those assets in order to move off of a piece to not be a championship contender. The better gambit for me is you hope that he gets healthy because there is no structural damage, because it is something that they can't quite sort out, that you catch lightning in a bottle. He's healthy for this run. You get to see it, and maybe he becomes more attractive to teams in the offseason. Or, unfortunately, what might be the case is it's pieces around him that got to move. That maybe it's RJ in the offseason. It's something else. Maybe it is a quickly trade at some point. But, yeah, the last thing I think this team should be doing right now is sacrificing multiple high-value assets just to move off of a contract in order to take on a guy like Sabonis, who is also old, is also not performing well, has also not been fully healthy, and makes $42 million a season and wasn't exactly covered in glory in Sacramento when it comes to winning. Like, popular player for a loser franchise. That ain't it for me. So duck the tax. And that's fine. Quick break. Come back. We got Luke Gazdic coming up here shortly. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave 5 stars. Do those things. We'll be back in a second. The true nightmare of yesterday for anybody in the Toronto Maple Leafs orbit is that while we're getting the break from the team, which I personally need, I don't know about many of you, but yeah, this season has not been joyous. Had fun watching Troy Stecher. I had a good stretch where the team was winning. Outside of that, most of the conversations have been fairly painful. I don't like talking about people's jobs. I don't like talking just what feels like an endless run of negativity. I don't think anybody does, but I have to be real about this team. And to me, it's an outlook is not overly positive. But the number one nightmare from yesterday in this break is that it adds a month of nothing ahead of the trade deadline. And now the Leafs are 5 points out. They've won 3 in a row. And so even though my position will not change, period, there's nothing that could happen before the trade deadline, period. I don't care if they're 1 point out. That would move me off the position of the smartest thing to do with this team is to move off of as many sellable assets as you possibly can. Recognize that this team ain't it, that they've had ample opportunity throughout the course of the season to prove different. That home stretch was the time. You could have proven it there. You had a home game against the Buffalo Sabres where you trotted out Darryl Sittler and a bunch of Leafs legend, and you laid an egg. You played against Mitch Marner in a game that was supposed to be highly intense, and you laid an egg. And then the Colorado Avalanche came into town. They beat your brains in, and so did the Minnesota Wild. a bunch of actual contenders. They made you look like nothing even close to it. And the idea that you can beat two teams that are actively tanking as much as they possibly can, and an Edmonton Oilers group that, let's be honest, isn't all that great, but also has their star players looking forward to the Olympics, and Leafs too, but still, come on. It required you to get a 5-on-3 power play for you to beat the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah, like, let's be real. But the idea of us doing this for the next month of should they not? Oh, my God, it's going to drive me insane. Luke Gazdic, NHL and Sportsnet Hockey Night in Canada. What's up, buddy? How we doing? Should they not?
Sorry, I'm dying. It's just like they won last night. It's just like the worst possible outcome.
It's the worst outcome.
I just love it, dude. You know I'm from here, and I listen to a lot of this too. I grew up with it, so I just like it's.
Am I wrong?
So comical. No, you're not. It's just it's so comical to me. It's just like it's great win last night. Like great team effort, full 60.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think you're wrong, man. Like that was fairly predictable. Them coming into the Western swing.
Yes.
Pretty much, laying it down here and getting themselves back in the fight. But no, I surely agree with most of the stuff you're saying.
Yeah. I don't want to do this for a month. I just want to focus on Canada hockey. I can't wait to root for McDavid. Did your life flash before your eyes when Carlo hit him there and he crumpled onto the ice for a second? Because that's probably the maddest I've ever been at a Leaf.
I know. It's like, what are we doing here? Let's bubble wrap these guys. Because we were watching, like, Sid went down the intermission. Was before or after? Yeah, it was before. Mm-hmm. So we just weren't sure. Good on him, though, man. Like, stick taps, Brandon Carlo. Like, Darnell Nurse isn't, he's not heavyweight in the league, but he's 6'7" and can throw. He's a pretty tough kid. So like, I got a lot of respect for guys that stand up to it there. But yeah, man, it looked bad for a second.
Yeah, I had the same rage as the only thing like I can really compare it to is when Cam Jansen hit Thomas Caberlet, and I just hated Cam Jansen. I've talked to him about this on the show before, but yeah, like I felt this deep amount of rage because Caberlet was like the one guy you didn't do that to with the Leafs at that time. And when I watched McDavid go down, I was like actively rooting for Darnell Nurse in that fight, being like, good, teach you a lesson. Don't let that guy.
I know. And you know what? Yeah. Trent Frederick was right there.
I know, he skated right by him.
I don't know. He like looked at McCabe, but like, and I get it, man. Like I've been there where a hit, that's what I'm saying. I've been there where a hit happens on the ice and you're like, you're not really sure what happened, but you ultimately do. Like, you know what's going on. And like, sometimes you're at the end of the shift. That's where I wouldn't square off. But if something happens like that, like I'm beelining over. So that wasn't a great look for him.
I thought it was a horrific look. My theory was that that's his former teammate. And I don't know.
Oh, true. The Boston connection. There it is.
Yeah, because that was
you're probably right.
Man, you're the most hated Oiler right now.
Oh, I know, dude. They got a couple whipping boys there right now. Ten's one of them for sure. 88, Mangiapane's getting it pretty. He had a little bit of juice last night, thankfully. Like, I didn't have an outstanding game, but at least he was more noticeable than before. Man, it's not easy coming in and out of the press box. And, like I get the year hasn't gone the way they've wanted for him, but coming in and out of the press box and getting, call it sub 10 minutes, no special teams, like in the greater scheme of things, it's a tough thing to go out there and just, put up points or whatever they want you to do in that instance, produce. Not an easy role.
So basically the reason why I went on that little rant before you came on is my goal of this segment is actually not to spend really any time doing the should they, shouldn't they, who should they, what should this be. Like I've reached my maximum for the week on this topic, and I know I'm going to do more in the future. So it's just like I kind of got to save a little bit of the bullets. So I want to do just a few other things. One of them is a look back, and one of them is a look forward. But I do want to start with an Edmonton thing, which is I know that that's the last game before the Olympic break, okay? But, I think everybody watches Edmonton the second most. That's my theory in Canada, is like everybody's second most watched team is the Edmonton Oilers because you want to watch McDavid. And it's certainly if you're on the East Coast, it falls like it matches up well with the schedule. They're not good. Like, they have one more
They're flawed.
Yeah,
they
have one more point than the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they've got the world's greatest player and another great one, too. But the Jari trade is not exactly like, wow, thank goodness they made that. Their blue line is meh. Their depth is meh. We're talking about this Bobby McMahon trade to them, and everyone's already basically putting up billboards for Bobby. And I'm like, all right, like Bobby McMahon's a fine player.
I was a part of it last night too, to be honest. My hands are not clean.
I know they're not. I watched you do it.
Just like, it makes so much sense, dude. He's from Wainwright. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it feels like the script is written. Like, I don't mean to cut you off with the Oilers, but you're exactly right, man. Like, they are super flawed, but I also feel like, has this not been every year? Has this not been the last 2 years where there's so many questions? Like, go back to last year with Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner and these guys that Jeff Jackson brought in that just weren't working. They were talking about making coaching changes, and Stuart Skinner couldn't stop a puck, and they end up taking Florida to 6 3 months later anyway, right? The thing that frustrates me is, like, they like literally talk openly about how they don't really care about the regular season. Like, they just love the playoffs, but like, you got to get there, right? And I think you got to get yourself in a good position. But you're right that the defensive part of the game, I think, is frustrating to watch at times. Like, the thing I did in the pregame before, like, I think they thought the goaltending move would fix a lot of their problems, and it hasn't. Like, it's made things worse. And so Knobloch comes out after practice 2 days ago and talks about how he's going to change their whole defensive scheme. Like, they're going to make a couple tweaks for the next 2, but like, during the break, they're essentially going to run back a new whole defensive scheme, because he says guys can't expect to score every night. And that's what I see, is like, guys just blowing the zone. Like, they don't really want to play defense. They want to get out of there as quickly as possible, where it's like, if they dump it in, Bush is getting it, they're high flipping it to speed, and their guys are just going. I think they just got to worry about the defensive side a little more. But I think you're right. Like, the depth scoring too, it's always been an issue, but it's even more this year. Like, they're just not getting a ton from their bottom 6. They're bringing up guys from the minors. They've tried Hudson. Howard hasn't. The one with Howard's been tough too. It's like, he's a skill top 6 guy. They've brought him up and put him on the 4th line. Same thing, playing no special. Nobody's going to play specials. I keep saying no special. No one's playing on the power play except for 5 guys. I just think, it's tough to score in that bottom 6, but they need some guys to do it, and they haven't had it.
Yeah. And the book, again, I'm not Mr. Watches prospects. Like, I cover all the major sports. So the idea that I'm going to dive deep into film on Howard is just not there. But he has become more of a point of interest because of the McMahon trade, right? And the idea that, hey, is this guy one of the targets, right? So, but the book on him is horrible defensive player, like, not responsible whatsoever.
He just wants to go play offense. That's kind of what I see from him. Like, that KK quote, like, that strikes me as like that straight Howard, where you see wingers just blowing the zone and they just want to get going. I will say though, like, and I understand this isn't too hot of a take with Edmonton, but 97 and even Leon for that matter, they've reached a point where they are so good that they can just win games by themselves. And I understand that that's not a sustainable way or model of winning hockey games, but there's just so many nights where no one's going. And even last night, McDavid almost, even with 0 points, almost, got them back in the fight. I just think they do so much for that hockey team that it kind of, it exposes that there's a couple of holes down the line.
Yeah, but to me, so if I'm an Oilers fan, that's actually the most frustrating part about this for me. Is like, our room for error is so great with the rest of the roster that these 2 guys, and yes, Hyman, and yes, he was hurt last year, but you have so much from 2 guys that it gives you all this room to just be okay in the other spots. And when I look at the rest of their lineup last night and I'm watching them play, I'm going, it's my famous, like, the favorite thing I like to use is the Office Space line. What is it that you say you do here?
What do you do?
Yeah, and that's what I look at with so many of their guys. I'm like, what is it you say you do here? Like, what is your role on this team? What is the thing? And you're right. Maybe come playoff time, some of those dudes will emerge as heroes, and I do have a lot of faith in them. But, God, I don't know what's more frustrating is anything other than this, where you just, like, you have the 2 most important pieces, and everything else is just, not it.
I think it's been, I don't want to say surprising, but it has been surprising that they have had so much trouble finding guys to play with those 2. Like, it's not an easy task. And I think, like, people say, like, oh, if I play with McDavid, I'd score 30. You're like, no, like, you wouldn't actually. It's tougher said than done. But you're right, man. I'm super curious with them leading up to the deadline and what they're looking to do, because they're in it right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they have their first they can dangle this year. I know we talked about Bobby. I don't know if Bobby fetches a first. Probably does. I would hope that he does if you're sending him out. But yeah, they're a super interesting team to watch, especially coming out of the break here and seeing what they do.
Well, the case for the Bobby McMann first, because I've seen a lot of people say, like, I don't see that being the price. But I went so far as yesterday to say, like, I feel like that's a real problem if they don't get that back. Because, listen, Lawton's a center. But last year at the deadline, the Leafs moved there first to get him and a top prospect. So the idea
you have to get those back.
Yeah, but just like the guy that makes what McMahon, I think, makes like 1.35. It's just nothing.
Yep.
He can fit in just about anywhere. He scores. He's going to have 20 goals ahead of the deadline. One of the fastest players in the league. It'd be crazy to me if that doesn't end up netting you like something of a quality return. I'm not saying a world bending, like you're getting a whole bunch. It's like, but yeah, this is the NHL trade deadline. Guys get moved
100%.
Go for first that you wouldn't think would normally do that, and certainly not in the offseason. That's the case to make it. Okay, here's the other thing from the Oilers that I couldn't stop thinking about last night. And there's two things on Hyman that I've got. One is I don't like seeing guys get hurt, and I feel crushed for Anthony Cirelli because that's an all-time dream that's being taken away from you. And he didn't pick the roster, so like this isn't his fault. He gets hurt. That sucks. I feel for the guy. But I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I don't feel better about having Sam Bennett there, given what he has meant to Canada at the Four Nations and how he performed in the Stanley Cup playoffs last year. And I just didn't think like anything he had done over the course of the season was enough to say, well, this guy's bumped out. I would have said that that's other players. But whatever. That was just my opinion, shared by a lot of other people. It wasn't unique. He's going there. I do feel a little bit better about it. That being said, there is something a little bit out there of historically great players, sometimes they get someone who might not be quite as qualified in terms of their level of greatness because they know they fit well with this guy. And Zach Hyman does get overlooked. And I do think that there's a conversation of like, you know, Crosby got Kunitz. Where's the consideration of McDavid getting his guy, and why they seem to be a little bit more reluctant to bring Zach Hyman for Team Canada when I think he has a pretty solid case? Like, do you like that it's Bennett over Hyman?
I mean, it's tough to argue against Bennett. I think that I agree with that point that he probably deserves to be there. In the grand scheme of things, he really does. I think he's earned it in his play and the resume. But for me, Hyman's an absolute no-brainer. I think one of the hardest things, we'll start there, for these guys going into the Olympics is like making their transition into playing with all these different guys that they might have not played with before as easy as possible. And one of the easiest ways you can do that is to pair guys with guys they're with during the regular season. Like, you're going to bring Taves and McCarr, you're going to play them together, right? Your Tampa guy, maybe your Tampa guys, well, obviously two of them are hurt now, but I would assume that Coop would be looking to play at least two of those guys together just so he has that part done. He's like, I don't have to worry about those two. I think one of the biggest storylines for Canada going in outside of Canada is who's going to play with McDavid. Like, who makes sense with him? Do you go back to what you did at the Four Nations, maybe playing with Reinhart a bit? When Zach Hyman is sitting right there, it's like you have a guy that, I get the argument. It's like started slow, came out of the gates. That was a tough injury that he was out with for a long time. But you have a guy that just knows him like the back of his hand and like has scored at a prolific pace over the last couple of months here. Not too many guys in the NHL that have scored more than him. And to me, like, if Point can't end up going here, which we really don't know. Like, they're going down to the wire with this one. I know. Like, they are taking this till the last possible second. But for me, it's way overdue. And I think if Point can't go, this is an automatic Hyman bid. This should be a no-brainer decision. Just because I think he's earned it, man. It's like watching the Oilers. We talk about watching the Oilers on a nightly basis. Every single night, he is the guy that you don't have to worry about in terms of effort and his output and what he's bringing on a nightly basis. You never have to worry about him. Coach's dream, low maintenance, physical, has a bit of skill and jam, a lot of skill and jam to his game. And I just think he's the perfect guy to bring and put with that forward core. Yeah, I really want Point to be there. Just a dog. Yeah. Unbelievable player. But you're right. If he doesn't go, then and it's not Zach Hyman, that would actually be a 10 out of 10 surprise for me. Where I would go like, wow. Like if if Point didn't go and they didn't take Hyman.
Yeah. If he was not the now guy on the bubble, that this should be the case. And you're right. I do find it a little intriguing that there is always this lean of, hey, you want to have guys who have chemistry together, right? Like that goes back to Salt Lake when they made the checking line. They were like, hey, this is something that we covet. And the fact that they don't covet it with Connor McDavid, and yeah, he's amazing, and it's Canada's forward group, right? Like it's really hard to. That's the worst part about this discussion is when you're like, well, then this guy shouldn't be there. You go, no, I need that guy there.
Yeah. So many studs,
right?
Dude.
So I get it. I'm just saying, yeah. I at least thought about it yesterday. Like I'm a Bennett guy, and I wanted him there. But when that ended up happening, I went, and I'm watching the game, I was like, there really was a case for this guy. Okay, then that brings me to this. This is a little bit more of a two-parter on Hyman. So yesterday is the game where he ends up playing more games as an Oiler than a Maple Leaf, which made me feel incredibly old.
Okay.
And it also made me feel, I'll be honest, the way that I always feel whenever the Leafs play Zach Hyman, which is, God, that is actually, when I look back at the worst mistakes that this team ever made, it was the Leafs not giving him that extra year and walking away from a guy who wanted to be a Toronto Maple Leaf and who embodies so much of what this team doesn't have, which is what you just said. A guy who shows up every night, and he is the exact same. There's no mystery. What are you going to get from Zach Hyman tonight? Oh, will you get the same effort level? No, he's the Energizer Bunny. There was clearly the stuff with the injuries, and that was a bit of the reason why Toronto didn't want to go long-term. There was always been a history in the NHL of player that is not a clear blue superstar hitting free agency and getting a contract that ends up aging poorly, and he definitely had, the chance to be one of those. Like, that was a conversation at the time. I was having that with people at the time. But you look back on that deal, and him signing with Edmonton, and what a huge what if it is for the Leafs. And I couldn't help but think about this. We talk about the Kadri trade here all the time. Like, it is a point of frustration for Leaf fans that is nonstop. It's the Kadri trade. It's the Kadri trade. His, I think, is far more defensible just from the standpoint of 2 straight playoffs where he ends up getting a suspension and really hurt your team in high leverage. And the team going, yeah, you know what? We need to change of pace. I hated the return at the time. I thought that looking back on it, it was really rough. But I don't know why we don't talk about Hyman with the Leafs the same way that we do with Nazem Kadri with the Leafs, given that one to me is less defensible, given that it wasn't even a trade. It wasn't like he killed you in the postseason. Yes, he was hurt, but my God, if you had him here, the way that you'd be looking at this team and this core and the money that they would be spending and the way that they spent the money too, like
he'd still be playing with Matthews on the right side, right? Like they would just be running those two. Like they would just be running those two down. Man, he'd be so good for this group. Yes. I just remember not the backlash that came with that contract, but people thinking how poor it was going to age. But I think the thing that they thought it was too long, too much term, right? And I think the thing with Zach that stings the most is that like he wanted to be there, like he wanted to be a Leaf,
yes,
and like not exactly a city kid, but right outside, and put in some good years for them. And I think that's the thing that bites, is that he really wanted to be a part of this core. And you hear it when he talks about them. Like I've had some combos with him, like on and off the record, and just talking about playing with that core and how much it meant to him. Man, he would be such a fixture in this lineup. And I just can think the way he goes now every single night, you need a dog on that first line that can go get pucks, retrieve pucks for 34, understands the assignment, finds him wherever he is, like right-handed shot. Like that's the guy that would be riding shotgun right now. And I think that's why it stings a little bit, is because he'd still be doing this thing on a nightly basis.
That's what I mean. It's like eventually Kadri would have been gone in free agency because they wouldn't have paid him. Like that's the part that nobody talks about when they're like, Kadri should still be a Leaf, or that trade was bad. I'm like, yeah, for sure. But there was just no way with their cap situation, especially entering what was the flat cap era, that they were going to give him that money, especially where they were out with Tavares and Matthews. And so at some point, the rubber did meet the road, or was going to meet the road, either as an own rental or as a trade. Could the trade have been better? For sure. But it wasn't. I don't know why people don't talk about the Hyman part of this the way that they do with Kadri. Like, he's brought up. But to me, trading Nazem Kadri after he killed you in 2 straight playoff series versus letting Zach Hyman walk so that you could sign Peter Mrazek and Nick Ritchie is, like, that's about as bad a business as you can possibly do in any sport.
Not great.
No.
Hey, you know what? But I look at their centers now. Now that we're watching this game last night and we're talking about Kadri and down the middle, that's a nice 4, like from top to bottom. Like that's one area I think they're fine. Going from Austin, Johnny, I thought Nick Waugh played really good last night.
Yep.
Doesn't like if you watch him, ISO him, doesn't make a ton of like unbelievable plays, but is really good in his details. Obviously always on the D side of the puck. And then Lottie, I don't even know if Lottie is a fourth line center, but I just think that's one area where they can continue to build around. I don't know where you're sitting on Lawton. I don't know if now is the time to trade him. I guess the question to all these, I know we're not going to get into the weeds on who's getting traded and who doesn't, but it depends on what the return is, like what a team is willing to pay you for this player. Like we don't see what they are, but if someone's going to toss you a first or whatever it is for him, sometimes you have to say yes. But like, I just don't know if he's the guy I want going. How much do we talk about culture here and wanting to bring in the right guys that have the right attitude? We talk about the Hymans of the world that show up the same effort with the same effort every night. And I just think Lottie's one of those guys. He might be one that it's a year left too. So maybe see what happens next year, but I don't know if he's a
UFA. He's a UFA. So,
oh, this is it.
Yeah, this is it. So
Ooh.
It does complicate things. I did this with Bourne, but I'm saying the same things as you. Like Lawton fits here and he doesn't seem to mind the market whatsoever. He seems to embrace the market. He seems to understand the market, which, like you said, you're from here. You know what that means, right? Like some guys they do not get it. Like, and it's not just a market issue, but so I'm going to go because I don't want to blame Maple Leaf or something, but I saw Jack Hughes give this quote today. Did you see him?
Oh, the fans?
I don't know what to say.
Not great. Yeah, not great.
That is.
Well, you know this too, man. I think there's a certain responsibility that comes with playing on an original six team for the macro, but to the micro with the Leafs. Like, I think there's a certain responsibility that comes with being a Toronto Maple Leaf and, you know, being a prominent figure in this city and being a public figure and accepting the media coverage that comes with it. And there's certain guys that are built for it and there's certain guys that aren't. And I just think Lottie understands that and he is built for it.
He is. And that's why, for me, when I talked about this with Bourne, I like Roy too. But I think the Leafs are in a position where, one, they should be selling if those pieces coming back are appropriate. But from a person, I think Lawton has more to give. And my fear with him is the same thing with Hyman, where if you didn't trade him or he goes to free agency and then a year from now he's actually playing in an elevated role for a good team and everyone's going, you let this dog go who's actually he was a first-round pick. Like, you guys were playing him limited minutes on a fourth line in a complete checking role, and he actually had more to give, and that scares me. Whereas with Nick Waugh, I agree with you. I really like the player. He pops for them. He does a lot of little things for a big guy. He's got good hands, good vision. I just trust him in all scenarios. But to me, it comes down to you got to pick one of those two guys. And for me, I'd be going to Scott Lawton with a contract extension. I'd be saying, hey, man, if you sign this, we want to keep you here ahead of the deadline. And then I'd be shopping Nick Waugh. And then if the other thing doesn't happen where Lawton goes, no, I want to explore free agency. Well, I'm sorry, you can't risk it. As much as I'd love to have him be a Leaf, maybe you circle back in the offseason with him and see if you can lure him back on a free agent contract and you end up trying to keep both. But if I'm him, I'm looking at it and going, yeah, but I don't want to enter the same situation where I'm the fourth line center. I embrace that role. I give it my all. But when you have that big game, I think it was the Vegas game where he plays 9 minutes, if I'm Scott Lawton, I don't want to have that anymore in my career. I want to be someone that's a little bit higher in the lineup, more consistent ice time, all of that different stuff. So I do think you're going to have to choose on one of those two guys. But yeah, my choice would be Lawton. I just don't think that it's as clear of a path forward for them.
Yeah, I think so. And listen, like Lottie's a great player. I don't know where he's getting that more consistent role. Maybe on a team like Philly where he came from that
I can tell you if he was on Edmonton right now, he'd be having a little bit more of a consistent role. That's for sure.
He'd be up that lineup, I'll tell you. No, man, it's going to be interesting to see what they do moving up here. Like, I know we spoke about Bobby and like the Ekman-Larsson thing is fascinating to me. You would, hey? 100%. Like, I get he's having a career year, maybe a bit of an outlier, like 30s year here, but a couple of years left. You just got to think of when the value's highest for the player, right?
Now.
And you think that if you think that's now, then that's the thing. It's like, if you're getting a first for him too, but these first rounders, like you got to make them work for you too.
Yeah.
Like, because if you're planning on just drafting these kids, they're a long ways away. Like that's not the play, right? So whether you can get your first back and maybe package those up for something right away. But like I said before, man, like I don't know what the return is on some of these guys.
Sure.
And if it's worth it, like that's where you probably start.
No, that's the case I'm making. I'm not moving guys other than, to me, McMahon is the or best offer, right? Like you're moving him no matter what for whatever is the best trade that you can get. The Lawton one, I said, I think that you go to him with a contract. You say, we want you here. This is what it would be. If you're not going to take it, obviously we have to trade you. And obviously we'd be trading you to a contender.
Do you think they pulled the Tavares not like super underpaid, but like, you know, a more affordable call it a hometown discount contract?
But that's part of the reason why I don't think Lawton takes it is this is going to be his best opportunity in his career to get paid. And he doesn't have huge career earnings. And I never fault guys for that. Like, I fault you if 100%. You're, I don't even really fault you, but when it's a megastar and you're making big time money and you're making US dollars in a Canadian market and you don't give any somewhat of a haircut, that's where I look at it and go, man, do you want to win? Like Crosby did it. Like everybody, the winners do it. McDavid does it. But when it's,
who's that? Connor Brown's a good example of that. He took 2 minimum deals in a row, $1 million from Edmonton last year. And I think he really wanted to stay there and be an Oiler. But when the New Jersey Devils knock on the door and offer you $12 million or whatever you take, it's life-changing money for guys like that. So they're going to go get paid 100%. I'm the same, man. I'll never fault a guy for going and getting paid.
Totally. You got to do what you think is best for you. And if you prioritize getting paid over, and like, it'd be one thing if the Leafs were winning and you say, hey, you take a little bit of a discount to be with this winning culture. And instead it's like, we suck. We're a bunch of losers. Why would I got to take less money to be on the loser team just because I'm from here? Like, no, thanks. I'm going to pass on that. But yeah,
hey man, 5 points out.
Yeah, I know. The premise is with all these guys that are the bubble trade candidates that it's based on the return. Like, yeah, I'm not just selling OEL for the sake of selling OEL. My assumption is given his pedigree as a player, the fact that he can not only snap the puck, but brings some edge and some physicality to your team, that he is one with the Panthers, that he's going to play for Sweden. And I talked to their head coach on this show about a month ago now, and he was talking about how important his intangibles are for their team. Like, he's a playoff style defenseman. I would think that someone would pay a lot for him versus
he's been outstanding, dude.
Unreal. Like, he's been their best defenseman this year by like a
you just
wide
said
margin,
too,
I think.
One of the only, I won't say the only, but one of the only guys that has a little bit of fire to him too. That even like last night, like Mangiapane snows Stoli, and he's the first guy in there just feeding him with rights. Like I
love him.
I have a lot of time for him, man, to be honest.
I do. I completely agree. And that's why it's like, I'm not just giving him away. The premise here is that he's going to be 35 years old this summer. And if you are trying to make moves and you are trying to change the composition of this team, because I don't think that you can run it back essentially, and a few minor tinkers on the outside isn't going to do it for anybody here. The frustration level is going to be too high. So he's just one of the guys.
What do you think they do with the goaltending situation? Do you think there's a market for like a Stolars, or is Wall the guy that people are calling about? I'm super curious to see with their, I mean, it did so well for them last year and obviously the injuries this year, but I just wonder if someone is calling on one of those guys.
So for me, I couldn't help but think last night, Edmonton, watching him play, going, we probably shouldn't have jumped the gun. We probably should have just been a little bit more patient with this position, and that we got a little desperate and we made the Jari trade and kind of went all in here.
I do think the fans, the fans did kind of maybe have a little bit of peer pressure in that situation. Sure. I'm watching last night thinking, like, if McMahon's coming, why not throw Stolars into that as well? I don't know how they make that work, but
no, I don't think they can.
Yeah. I wonder about that, and with Hill to be playing as well as he did early in the year when they were looking for someone to stabilize the position, move him into a full-time role. That's an interesting question for me.
To me, I think that your goaltenders aren't going to lose value, and that you'd be kind of selling low on Stolars now unless someone was desperate, right? He just signed the contract extension. He does get hurt. He was just hurt. It's only one good game since he's been back. So the idea that someone's going to move like real assets into the middle for him is trickier to see. The problem is that in the offseason, you can't do the thing with Hildaby anymore of just a two-way contract. It's like you're now at risk. So what's the decision that you end up having to make there? I think it's going to be in large part how they view the ceiling of the hockey team. And that's why I'm saying you got to get a lot of work done now, because you need to be able to put yourself in a better position. They're not rebuilding. Like,
they're fine. Like, they're in a fine spot. And I think that's what,
if they sell.
That's what I try to stress, is that I think they have a couple movable players, but they're like right there. Like, this isn't a tear to the studs, man. Like, they can flip this thing around. I know the whole Boston comparison is there. that they've made, and they're sitting right ahead of them too. They've got an outstanding goaltending this year, though. Like, I don't know if I'm buying the Bruins this year,
No,
but
me neither.
I do see they're right there, man.
Yeah, the Bruins, that's actually part of the case for the Leafs of don't sell too heavy, is that you're 5 points back of Boston. They lose tonight. You feel like, yeah, they're actually kind of catchable for you. They're also the case for why you should retool, though, is just how much better they feel about their organization moving forward, not even just in this year. And I think that's the case for the Leafs. I will say this about the tear down to the studs thing. There's no scenario to me where they do it. Like, those guys are under contract. They're stars. They don't own their first round pick again next year. Like, they're not removing those guys and going in the tank. But when people tell me, hey, JD, I think they should tear it down to the studs based on what I've seen over the last decade, I'm like, yeah, that's a totally valid point. I don't dismiss it. Last thing. So yesterday they get their first power play in 9 periods, right?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I didn't get to do this the other day. I forgot to do it. But I went to the Sabres game, right? Like the complete no-show against Buffalo.
The Sittler 7-4, yeah.
Yeah.
Tough one, dude. That, like, when we look back on the year, like that's one of the games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're like, this is, you want an answer? This is kind of your answer, right?
That's it. That's the point to me of like where they are in the standings. Like, you already had your chance to not be a seller, and it was that game in particular, and you blew it. So sorry, but that stretch was kind of the death knell for your season in terms of decision making. But where I'm going with this is the one thing from that game, and it's like I don't go to enough live because I do Leafs talk, right? So I'm doing a post game show, and I do it from my office, and we don't have a setup at the arena. But the value of that game was when people talk about why they don't get power plays, and you watch them live and you're sitting there the way they play, and you go, yeah, of course they don't. Like, are there the odd missed calls in the league? Do I think that maybe there's the odd ref with the Leafs, whatever? The way that the story of they go 9 periods without a power play and that being some kind of a cabal conspiracy against them, it's like, nah. Go be in the arena and watch the intensity in which they play with and the amount of time that they actually have holding on to the puck and how often they'll be cycling it around and hemming a team in. Like, they don't deserve more than what they got, man. Like, what they get is what they get.
The cabal theory sounds like that's a McKee. That might be a McKee, the cabal theory.
It's a McKee. It's a Twitter. It's just I just can't, like, look at the way they play. They don't
I think
get
it's their
plays.
style of play.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't. I don't know. It's crazy that. First of all, 3 out of 4 games is crazy that they didn't have a call. But I think it's just their style of play, to be honest. Like, I get it's McDavid going back to the Oilers, or like Draisaitl. Like, these guys draw penalties like crazy. I just think from the way they play, hanging on to pucks, like ragging pucks and like trying to force guys through and trying to force guys to take them on you. I think it's just something that it's not in the facets of their game, really. But good on them for scoring on those power plays. That's where you got to execute. But you're right. They just don't, I don't know, whether it's not driving your legs, they don't draw a ton at all.
I do not view it as anything other than the way that they play. That's it. Like, sorry. I don't think 100%. That there's more to it than that. Luke, thanks as always for making time, buddy. I appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Thank you for having me. Have a good one, bud.
Yeah, dude. Enjoy the break. Luke Gazdic of Hockey Night in Canada. Yeah, anyway. I know we do a lot of the look back. Oh, we should have things, but Hyman really is like, you go through all and that's been a lot of today's show, looking at how the Raptors are in the place that they are, the Leafs are the place that they are. But yeah, as much as I didn't like what they got back for Kadri, I was definitely advocating for, hey, you know what? It's probably time for a change of scenery and a time for everyone to move on. You can't risk, what if this happens a third time? Like, there was a case with Hyman, like, to not want to spend that money and then spend it on what they ended up spending it on. To me, like, that's I don't know, is there a more indefensible move over the course of, I think, this last 10 years than letting someone who should probably be on Team Canada walk for nothing as an own rental to the Edmonton Oilers, who fit perfectly with a top-line player who you knew fit with your top-line player and doesn't make, to be honest, like, a lot of money and has already made good on that contract? Yeah, it's a baddie. It's a real baddie. And I don't know why people don't talk about it the same way. I think it's just because it's a trade. Trade is a sexier thing. You have the exact result of what the return is. But, yeah, people talk about Hyman, but it usually is only this time of year where they play the Oilers, he's doing great, and then people bring it up again, and then it kind of goes away. It's not really in the Maybe it is for other people. You can let me know at JD Bunkis anytime. But for me, I never really get that conversation overly often the way that it happens with like the Kadri trade. Anyway, let's take a quick break, hit what we missed. Before we hit on what we missed, ticket giveaway all week. See a show that I think a lot of people are going to want to be at. Probably going to be one of the hotter shows of the summer. The iconic Canadian rock group Billy Talent is celebrating the 20th anniversary of their sophomore album, Billy Talent 2. And they're coming to RBC Amphitheater in Toronto on Saturday, July 18th. And we've got a pair of tickets to give away. Text the code word crisis unit. This is about the third time where it's been the code words, plural. This is the third time we've done this. But yes, crisis unit to 590 for your chance to win. Listen in tomorrow for our next code words and giveaway. If you don't win with us, tickets are now on sale on Ticketmaster. Contest open to Ontario residents. Only standard message and data rates may apply. Brandon Brown, what did we miss?
Well, we've been teasing, obviously, the Olympics getting going. The women's tournament actually starts tomorrow.
Yeah.
And obviously one of the bigger news pieces throughout the preparation has been the ice in Milan and how the stadium and the ice itself will play out. And we had some comments from Ice Master Don Moffat, who is working on his 5th games, works primarily in Colorado, works in that ball arena, handles the ice. And he's saying that the players are going to love it. It's been obviously his most difficult challenge so far, getting an arena ready, but he's very proud of what he's been doing. And like I said, the players are supposedly going to love it. A lot of practices and, of course, games getting going tomorrow on the women's side. Were you ever concerned that we were not going to get here, or that there would be some craziness?
What are you talking about? I mentioned this multiple times. When they first started showing videos of where that place was at, I couldn't help but think, oh my God, they're going to pull out of this thing.
Right.
Like they're going to. And then we got the report that the rink wasn't the right size. Then the first look at the rink is there's a huge hole in it. And then they papered that over. And apparently it was great when they did the practice game. So yeah, that was a point of stress for me. Listen, I know that McKee and I are worrywarts in terms of the way that we text each other about sports. And I think it's for good reason, but whatever. I think we probably had conservatively 45 text messages sharing things, updates on that rink going, we're not going. So, yeah, I was absolutely nervous. What I will say is Don Moffat, put in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Honestly.
Like, you do 5 games and you're the Ice Master, and if this one goes off without a hitch, which I'm anticipating it will, and by the way, he put his seal of approval on that bad boy. If Don Moffat says the players are going to love it, I don't want to hear anybody complaining about the ice. Like, I just don't. It's signed, sealed, approved. We did it right. Should be a household name in this country. So glad that he's still running things. God, to be his successor is a ton of pressure. That has got to be one of the most pressure-packed positions in this entire country. We can never let the Ice Master not be from here, by the way.
From Canada.
Yeah.
Of course.
Whoever the next Ice Master is, it's got to be a Canadian. That's my biggest takeaway from this is what is the level of competition globally right now for the next Ice Master to be the person that takes over and is the next guy? Because 5 Olympics, you start to wonder about a succession plan. Need Don to give the seal of approval, but it's got to come from within the country, all right? Like, that's actually the next important thing is having the next Ice Master make sure that we do not lose that status to some American or, yeah, God forbid, some hyper-attentive Swede. We can't have it. It's got to be a Canadian. We need to have the Ice Master. We need to be in control of the ice. It's a sneaky advantage for us. I really do believe that. What's next?
Yeah, a couple NFL stories here quickly. The interim executive director David White was speaking on Tuesday at the union's annual news conference this week. And he was talking about some of the comments that have come out recently about an 18th game in the NFL's regular season. And he basically said that the players have no appetite to do that. He pointed to injuries late in the season this year, obviously with the 17th game now over the last few years. And we saw some significant injuries in the wildcard weekend, which would be that de facto 18th game. So it seems like there could be some sort of battle. Obviously, the current CBA isn't up until 2030. So that at that point, we'll start to get into the conversations about whether an 18th game.
That's what I mean. It's so far away from me. It's like 2030. Do I think they're going to do it? Yeah, I do. Because
Yeah.
I think that the owners are greedy. They're going to continuously push for more. There will never be a limit here. Like, they're just always going to say more, 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 more. We've seen it with the NHL.
Yeah.
Why would the NHL be 84 games? What possible reason could you think that that is a better for your product situation than going to less games? To me, part of what makes the NFL special is the scarcity, and you going up to that many weeks is not really fundamentally changing that. To me, it just does become, I'm no shrinking violet. You know that when it comes to injuries, I say, yeah, no one wants to see players get hurt, but you're paid millions of dollars to do so and play the game you love. It's the cost of doing business. But I do find it, the NFL did this thing forever, right? Like the covering up concussions. We got a Will Smith movie that nobody saw out of it. When does it get to a point where you guys take the health of your athletes and the product on the field more seriously than just the short-term profits of what an added game gives you or how much it materially changes a television contract? I do not know. But at some point, there's just diminishing returns. And this is sort of what I've been saying about the NBA and the NHL forever and ever, which is I don't think modern sports appetites are going to continue in a way where people are going to be living and dying for 82 of these things. We're already seeing it with the NBA where most nights you go, who's in the lineup before I decide to watch this play? I think some of that's going to come to hockey eventually. But you do run the risk now with the NFL of it being so arduous that are you going to get load management in that sport? Like, are people going to feel the same way if the schedule keeps extending? And there's only so many good quarterbacks and so many good players, and I don't want to watch replacement level players because there's too many injuries. So that's where I kind of stand with that is, yeah, I'm good with the amount of football games we have and expanding it even to this degree. I'm like, I love football. I hate when it goes away, but I don't want to watch backups all the time, and I don't want to see added injuries. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow.